Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Be a Boy, our third episode, Elliott Ray. How
we
exciting.
are still here, still going strong.
We are very grateful to Bubble and Movember, of course, for supporting the podcast. Thank you, both of you. And today we're going to be talking about mental health in men and friendship, because our brilliant guest for today, Alex Holmes, who's written a fantastic book called Time to Talk, has some absolutely glorious pearls of wisdom about mental health for men and friendship. Something that honestly I feel like I don't know very much about. I'm not at all a specialist, so I learned quite a bit from this conversation. But firstly, shall we have a quick chat about International Women's Day?
I think we should. And also, we should highlight the fact that the sun's come out. I am feeling like a new man. Literally, I'm powered by the sunshine.
I saw all you Southerners ranting on about the sunshine, and then I went to London a couple of days ago and I thought, well, it's clearly Costa del London, so I didn't even take a coat with me. And it's not that warm, I'll be honest.
It's amazing. I think for me, it feels good.
International Women's Day, I have felt like it's filled my cup back up, and it was feeling a little bit flat and a little bit empty. And I know that a lot of people turn their nose up at these days that we're given to celebrate women. One day out of 365 days a year. There you go. Be grateful. There's a little day there just for you. I do think International Women's Day is important for galvanizing us all and reminding us that there are still challenges, there are still issues for women that we really need to focus our attention on. I'm always really grateful to the companies that want to have these conversations and that are willing to pay, because it's really important we pay women for their time on International Women's Day, to have experts come in to speak. There is a lot to celebrate. Actually, girls are doing really well in the education system. Women are earning more than ever before. They're actually now earning more than men up until the age of 24 years old. And I don't want to pitch this as a women versus men thing, because it's not. But I think after forever it being men always earning more than women, it's important to say that has now changed. 40% of MPs are now women, which is insane considering in 1983 just 3.5% of MPs were women. What a difference. And we've got organisations like 50/50 Parliament and Elector to thank for that. And women occupy 12 out of the 24 top roles in government, which is a huge sea change. The percentage of women on boards has increased to 40% in FTSE 100 companies. And then we've got this amazing employment rights bill that is making its way through Parliament. I really want to emphasise how important this bill is. As part of that bill, if you experience pregnancy loss before 24 weeks, you will be able to now access 2 weeks leave paid at the statutory rate, which is currently £182 a week. And that's for both parents, which I think is wonderful. And this puts us way ahead of other European countries. It's a real game changer. We will have gender pay gap reporting. So employers will have to say how they're going to close the gender pay gap. We will have ethnicity pay gap reporting as well. Paternity leave will be a day one right, although it won't be paid. But still, at least that shifts the dial. And we're going to have a full review of paternity leave and shared parental leave. Employers are going to have to do more on the menopause. Reasonable adjustments will have to be put in place for women going through the menopause, and they'll have to create equality action plans. And then we've got lots of stuff happening with flexible working. The detail isn't quite there yet, but we know that it will be harder for employers to reject a flexible working request. And so considering the marriage buy-in, which was where women literally had to leave their jobs when they got married, that was only outlawed 50 years ago. And now we've got all these really progressive policies that are going through Parliament and will make a real tangible difference to women's lives. And because they're going to make a difference to women's lives, they make a difference to men and to boys, because as we know, the reason why we do this podcast is because we're not an island and our lives impact the lives of other people around us.
I think highlighting all the things to come is definitely the right thing to do. What's your take on the mood around International Women's Day this year? I felt like last year there was a little bit of negativity, I would say. I think the year before, the theme was embrace equity, and people were encouraged to hug themselves and post a selfie. And I felt like there was backlash in 2024 from that theme in 2023. And lots of women I was seeing online saying, wait a minute, selfie is not going to improve the motherhood penalty.
No.
Let's do some more concrete action. I'm feeling that based on what's going on across the world, the Trump administration, the pushback against D&I from some organizations, it feels like International Women's Day this year is less about some of those gimmicks and more about people actually thinking this is really important and what is a tangible action and how do we go back to the basics of the conversations we need to have. What's your view on the mood around International Women's Day 2025?
I've seen employers who want to show that they still care about this deeply and that the UK is different. We are not America, and that we're not going to kowtow to the likes of Trump and Elon Musk, who are going to tell us that this stuff isn't important because we know that it is. But I have also seen that lots of women are ready to just climb under a rock, and they don't feel strong enough to engage in-person or online conversations about equality. And I've also seen pushback starting to happen, as I know you have as well, with companies thinking, why are we investing any time or money or resource into this? Every event I went to, this was raised. What do we think the influence of America is going to have on the UK? And I think it's a bit too early to tell, to be honest. And I've been to events to talk about the motherhood penalty, and lots of men have come. And that gives me hope, because actually we need men to be involved in this conversation. Women have been talking about this for a long time. But when I see men sitting in the room and nodding and really listening, that's when I think, okay, change is possible.
Yeah, and I think with everything that's going on, it's going to make the people who care a little bit more and realize that they have to be visible now. I feel like they're going to be a bit more motivated now to actually say, no, we need to make a stand. We need to make our voice heard. I do think this is a pivotal time in history, and we're going to look back in 5 years and people are going to think, oh, was I on the right side of history? But I'm optimistic, and I'm seeing less of the kind of negativity around it and more what can we really do to make a change.
Let me tell you what they can do to make a change, because on the flip side, we have found that pregnancy and maternity discrimination has increased. So it's gone from 54,000 women a year getting pushed out of their job for getting pregnant to 74,000 women a year. That is not good enough. The motherhood penalty is still crippling women's careers. PricewaterhouseCoopers found that Women in Work Index that they published, the UK has slipped down the rankings. Now it's at number 18 in the world. It was at number 10 in 2020. And this doesn't mean that we're not closing the gender pay gap, because we are. It's just at such a glacial pace that it means other countries are now overtaking. PricewaterhouseCoopers says it's going to take 3 decades to close the gender pay gap in the UK. That's too long. I will be very old. Don't want to be very old by the time that happens. We have the 4th most expensive childcare costs in the OECD. Childcare on average costs half the median income, which is killing women's careers. The pension gap between women and men is not closing. Women have about half the amount in their pension pot compared to men. Violence against women and girls. 2 women a week are killed by their partner or by their former partner. There's a surge of reports of domestic abuse. There's also a surge in online abuse against women, particularly Black women. Women's health, we're sitting at the 37th globally. We're lagging behind our European counterparts. There are 600,000 women on a waiting list for gynecological care. And our maternity units are in a mess. And it means women are not getting the care that they deserve. And we know that 3.7 times as many Black women die in childbirth or for up to a year after compared to white women. That is not good enough. So there's still a lot of work, really important work that needs to be done.
So much. And I think as you were talking there, it's emotional because you're thinking about, like, these aren't just statistics. These are real people, and you're thinking about your friends and your family and your colleagues. And so I think you make a great case there, a very emotional case there for us all to think more about what we can do individually. And I believe that we can make an impact. They say one person can't change the world. I think you definitely have in your work. A massive part of our campaign is around dads doing more of childcare, parenting out loud, being equal parents, taking advantage of the paternity leave that they are given. Around 160 organizations now offer equal parental leave. So many more offer enhanced paternity leave, but we still see sometimes that take up is lagging behind the 100% that we want to get to. So if all the men listening, we can play our part. If we are dads, we can play our part by being equal caregivers, taking advantage of flexible working. There are so many roles now that are done remotely, hybrid. Also role modeling. I have 2 girls. I'm very aware that they're not necessarily listening to what I say, less and less so, worryingly, but they are 100% looking at what I do. And I know my eldest seeing me being at home with our youngest, changing the nappies, doing the feeding, going to the park, that is going to change the way she thinks about relationships, about safety, about men. So there are things that we can do, and I think we can be empowered. We can definitely make change in our homes and our workplaces.
Helen Lewis, the great author and journalist, said, "There is one great contribution men can make to feminism. Pick up a mop." Which I love because, as well as Dad's parenting out loud, we know that equalising the domestic labour as well is going to make a huge difference to the lives of women, to the lives of children. And I think it's something that potentially isn't discussed enough. So you're absolutely right. Understanding the challenges that women experience, understanding the challenges that men experience, because of course International Men's Day is just as valid and important, and a great opportunity for us to talk about the challenges that men experience.
Ultimately why we're doing this podcast is to explore what it means to be a modern man now, the challenges, but also what does it mean to be a man now? And I think it definitely means being capable and willing to do it all. And that means, yes, sometimes we need to play that provider role and that protector role, but also to be a nurturer and a caregiver and an equal parent at home. And the ability to be all of those things, it's not easy. I'm not telling anyone it's easy. It's a juggle and it's super stressful and it's hard work. We're all figuring it out.
Yes, Queen, slay, as my kids would say.
Generation Alpha.
This is that answer to everything. Anytime I say anything, yes, Queen, slay. That's it. So let's talk about mental health, because I would love to hear your perspective on this, because you really, really know what you're talking about in terms of men's mental health. And we're going to obviously hear from Alex very soon, but I'd love to hear a bit from you, Elliott, about your experiences of having difficulties with your mental health.
For me personally, the whole reason I am doing my work, the reason I started to dedicate my life's work to supporting working dads, to thinking about masculinity, was after the birth of my eldest. My eldest is 9 now, and we had a very traumatic birth experience with her. She had contracted an infection called Group B strep. And if you know about Group B strep, you'll know it's very, very serious. Around 1 in 10 babies will pass away. Around 1 in 14 will have a very serious lifelong disability. So when she was born, she was lifeless and she was grey and she wasn't breathing. And we spent a very, very difficult 2 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. Ups and downs, good news, bad news. It's coming back more aggressively. The antibiotics aren't working. Actually, it is working. A roller coaster of emotions. She got a bump on the back of her head, about the size of a golf ball. And that's when we saw the doctors really concerned. And they sat us down and they prepared us for every eventuality. And we knew we were going to have a MRI scan the next morning. So we cried and prayed, all night for strength, for the good result. We went to the MRI scan, we came back, and we waited for the news. And thank God the news was good. It was bone structure, nothing to worry about. We had a couple more days in the hospital. We went home. And as so many men do, after being at home for a couple of weeks with their newborn baby, I went back to work pretty much straight away. So having been through the most traumatic experience of our lives, not knowing whether our little girl was going to make it out of the hospital, it was a couple of days at home and then bam, straight into a quite senior job where I was managing a team, leading, doing away days, chairing meetings. And when I look back at that first year of my daughter's life, the insomnia, the panic attacks, the anxiety, I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD. And I look back and I think, what was it about my idea about who I was that meant that there was no way I was going to share that with anyone? There's no way I was going to admit that I was losing myself. I really realized, even if I was able to do that, where are the spaces? Where is the support? Where is the conversation that makes that easy to do? And 9 years later, looking back and thinking about the changes I've made in myself, mainly due to the work I've done and the incredible men I've been privileged to speak to, and the journey that I've gone on personally, and the change in landscape around men's mental health as well, has meant that I'm a completely different person now. Do therapy, not because I'm in crisis at all. I'm actually feeling really good, but I know it's part of my toolkit in regards to keeping me well and fit and healthy. I will easily admit when I'm struggling, but I understand why so many men can't speak about the challenges. And I don't think that is that men go through any more challenges than women. I think life is challenging. I think it's how we respond to that, how we think about our masculinity, how we think about our friendship groups, how we think about ourselves. Is it safe for us to speak? Do we still feel like we are a man if we admit that we are going through a tough time? But Joeli, in terms of what you've seen from the men around you growing up, what are your reflections on men's mental health? What's your experience?
Look, firstly, I just want to say, what a story. I mean, that must have been so hard, because you, I am sure, felt that you had to be there as the support for your wife and for your child. So you were the support system, but nobody was supporting you through something that is so incredibly traumatic. And you may know the statistics, I don't, but the number of men who experience depression after a baby's born, you wouldn't call it postnatal depression, would you? What would you call it?
Male postnatal depression.
Yeah.
1 in 10,
Is it
1 in 10?
Yeah, 1 in 10.
1 in 5 for women, 1 in 10 for men, and largely undiagnosed. That's probably a lot higher.
Wow. And yet we just don't talk about that enough, do we? It is such a crazy roller coaster of a ride, even if everything goes perfectly to plan. And so your mental health will inevitably be rocked by that experience. I'm sure a lot of people are really grateful to you for sharing that very personal story. My dad had really bad mental health. He was on antidepressants for, I think, most of his life. He wasn't around very much. He very much took on that role of, I am the breadwinner, I'll bring home the bacon, I'll be dedicated to my career. And my mum was the primary caregiver by a mile. And then when he got screwed over at work really badly, and because all his value was tied up in work, it crushed him completely, and he had a full-on breakdown, like a very serious breakdown. I think I was about 19 at the time. And I mean, I won't go into detail what he did, but, he'd really lost it. And I suppose reflecting on that, I can see then why these very traditional roles, how damaging they can be for everybody. And that's partly why I became so passionate about Pregnant and Screwed and trying to create a better system that doesn't entrench these outdated notions of care. And what really saved my dad in the end, because it went on for a really long time, my mum and him divorced, and he started traveling the world. He went to live in Guatemala, he lived in Peru, he was all over the place. And I would get these crazy emails from him where he was like, getting into these harebrained businesses that made no sense. And then he became a Buddhist, and then he got into like witchcraft at one point.
Wow.
If I told you the story from beginning to end, you'd just be like, what? He got into a cult, right, in South Africa, and he's still in that cult. And he was married off within the cult. We weren't invited. He was told who to marry, and he is still married to her. And I'll be honest, he's really happy. Actually, it's given him a purpose that he lacked. And being told what to do and when to do it and how to do it is something he clearly needed. And it's given him a community of people. It stopped him thinking in his own head all the time, because he's got something else to focus on. I'm not encouraging people to join a cult, by the way, either. Like, I'm not saying all cults are good. It's just that it has worked for my dad. And I think that's because he was so lost. But he's a good person. He's a good human. He's a nice, kind human. But his soul was eaten up by these traditional gendered norms. And it ultimately crushed him. And had he been empowered and enabled, and it had been the norm for him to behave differently and to spend more time with his family and not to have that full responsibility of being the breadwinner, his life would have been very different.
And that's why we say the patriarchy is hurting men too. I've seen so many men feel like they have to live in the confines of this provider, protector that is their value. And it is, as you're saying, it's not good. It might feel good in that moment, but if that's all you can be, you're in trouble. Nurturing our relationships, knowing our children, knowing our partner, being happy at home, like that is the foundation of everything. And I think there has to be so much more conversation with our boys about that, because the people who I think get lost, it's not their fault. That's probably what they've been role modeled growing up. That's probably what their dad did in their household. They're part of this patriarchy that's told them this is success. It can quite easily come crumbling down, and you're left looking around with no friends, and work is work, and no love at home. And that's not a good place to be.
I had a message from a mum who said she would like some homework from us, where we give her an action of something she can do with her boys. And I thought, okay, we could give that a go, see where we get to. I don't feel like I'm an expert, but I can talk from my own perspective, and I'm sure you can as well, of something that we think might work and we might be trying, and let's work it all out together. So my piece of homework for today is I'm going to start talking to my boys more about friendship and the importance of friendship. And I'm going to talk about my friendships and how important they are to me. I'm going to encourage my partner to do the same. And I'm just going to keep reminding them how important to the foundation of your life and existence good friendships are, and that you have to keep investing in them. So that's what I'm going to do. You can try that if you want to. Not you, Elliott, people who are listening.
Are you giving me homework as well, Joeli?
Yeah.
So my thing would be, there's an organization called the Global Boyhood Initiative, and they have some amazing cards, which are prompts, and they are designed to have conversations with your boys. And there are questions like, should men be the main breadwinner in the family? Or how would you feel about being a stay-at-home dad? Or, just provocative questions. Just start conversation. And they are amazing cards. I'll link to the organization. I think you can order them online. And I would say your homework is to sit down with your boys on the weekend. It's half an hour and play the card game, see what conversations come up. They're quite challenging and there's no right or wrong answers to them, but they are prompts to get you to have some challenging conversations that you probably wouldn't have on a normal Saturday evening.
Fantastic. I love that. What we talked quite a bit about with Alex was group therapy and the importance of group therapy for men. So it'd be great if we could signpost people as well to places where they can access that group therapy.
So I would say there are so many local clubs. A lot of men have taken the initiative and said, you know what, I'm going to start a walking club, a darts club, a talking club. It's about what's in your local area. And it might be about some Googling. So if you live in Hertfordshire, if you live in Gloucestershire, you go on Google and you type in men's club, Hertfordshire, Gloucestershire. There's also nationwide organizations as well. I would say the number one who've been doing this for decades, Andy's Man Club. They are incredible. They have hubs up and down the country. They meet in parks, in pubs, and they have trained facilitators who can spend time with men and young men speaking about a wide range of issues. We at Music Football Fatherhood, we do monthly free online group therapy called The Lodge for dads. Everyone is welcome. It is completely free. It's on Zoom. There's a therapist present as well. So I would say go on our website, musicfootballfatherhood.com. Over the years, we have had the idea there's no spaces for men. That most definitely is changing. I would say the challenge now is getting men to show up in those spaces. There is still resistance. So through Music Football Fatherhood, we do incredible events in football clubs. Like you get a stadium tour, you might meet some of the coaches, maybe even a player or two. You get to meet amazing men. Some of the clubs even put on a lunch, right? And it's all free. Some men are still hesitant to come along because they still think, oh my gosh, you know, am I going to be put on the spot? Am I going to be asked to talk about my trauma? So they're scared. So I think the challenge now is not that there's not spaces. It's actually how do we encourage, support men to take that step to go along to it. On top of that, it's about professional support as well. You know, if there's someone in your life who you think is at crisis point or is getting there, then they need professional intervention. The NHS has a talking therapy helpline. It's free. We know that the self-referrals from men are minimal, about a third. So we really need to make use of that NHS talking therapy line. There is Mind, Calm. We will link all these organizations in the show notes. If you know a man in your life that is in crisis point, then that professional support is definitely where we need to be signposting to.
Great. So encourage a man in your life to go along to one of these group sessions. Say, just give it a go. Just try
Give it a go. The other men are not weirdos. They're just like us, right? They're normal. Trust me. There's some cool guys that go along to these things.
And, you know, if they just agree to try it once and you can say, that's it, that's all I'm asking. And then if you hate it, just don't bother going again. Let me go again. Right. So we have got a brilliant episode with Alex Holmes coming up. And thank you very much, everybody, for listening. So, Elliott, you very luckily have your parents close by and they do quite a bit of childcare for you. But they go to Grenada for 3 months every year. What do you do when they're gone? How do you look after yourself and your relationship?
Well, I feel very sorry for myself. Going to Grenada is amazing for them, but it's not so great for us. Luckily, we have Bubble. Bubble provides us with emergency childcare, backup childcare, and ultimately the opportunity for us to have date nights and also go to the spa every now and again. Because us parents, we need to maintain our identity. We need to maintain our self-care and our relationships. So Bubble is incredible for when my parents jet off to Grenada.
Find and book background checked nannies and sitters who can be with you in as little as an hour. Trusted by parents you know. Like us, search Bubble Childcare in the App Store or Google Play Store.
In this podcast, we want to bring you honest, vulnerable, and illuminating conversations around boys and men. We want to explore and understand the pain that many boys and men experience, often silently. We want to understand why 12 men take their lives every day in the UK, why 1 in 5 men have no close friends, why 1 in 8 men are suffering from a common mental health problem right now. and why so many men and boys keep things to themselves, afraid to talk and be open about their challenges. These are our sons, brothers, dads, colleagues, and friends. Fewer people across the UK have been speaking about men and boys quite as long as today's guest. And few people have the combination of lived experience, academic research, and professional experience as the man we are talking to today. So we are looking forward to this honest conversation about boys, men, and mental health with Alex Holmes. Alex is a renowned writer, mental health advocate, and award-winning podcaster based in the UK. He is the author of Time to Talk, How Men Think About Love, Belonging and Connection, a groundbreaking book that explores the emotional and mental health struggles faced by men while challenging traditional perceptions of masculinity. His work promotes open conversations around vulnerability, relationships, and emotional well-being. Alex is also the creator and host of the highly acclaimed Time to Talk podcast, where he interviews thought leaders, celebrities, and mental health experts about their personal journeys and insights into masculinity, love, and mental resilience. A certified mental fitness coach and hypnotherapist, Alex Holmes is deeply committed to breaking stigmas around mental health and fostering safe spaces for emotional expression. So welcome, friend and amazing human, Alex Holmes, to the podcast. How are you doing, Alex?
I really, really hate intros because I'm just always like, oh my God, have I done all of that? Yeah, no, I'm doing okay. I'm doing well. I'm walking into 2025 with some kind of clarity. I'm doing well. How are you both?
Yeah, I'm good. Joeli got her MBE.
And Elliott got his.
Oh, yes.
So we're MBE twins.
I'm not worthy.
So we're going to have a conversation about that. And actually, Alex was one of the people that I spoke to about the complications of the MBE thing. So Alex is a good friend of mine, someone who I have deep conversations with. And obviously today we want to talk about friendship and connection. And we have lots of conversations over WhatsApp and voice notes, often laying on a sunbed in the spa, which we need to do. We need to put another catch up in the diary for that. We need to do that.
In the calendar.
But Alex, a lot of your work has been around connection and love and friendship. The ONS did a survey. 1 in 5 men, 20% of men said they have no close friends. They struggle to find that connection. Let's go straight into it. Why is that? Why are so many men struggling to find connection and friendship in today's world?
I think there is a challenge of intimacy and trust that is pretty much deconstructed for us as boys going into manhood. Growing up, I think there is this concentration for boys to be in teams, to be collaborative, to work together, to find a unified goal and work towards something. And then over time, there becomes this individualization of what it means to be a man. As you grow out of becoming a boy and you go into being a man, you have to become a leader, you have to forge your own way, you have to do your own thing, you have to find your own identity. And unfortunately, what I have found in my experience is that you begin to drift away from the support of the group and you begin to create your own path and your own identity. And in doing that, you kind of sever the ties and you deprioritize the impact of friendship, especially as you grow into men, grow into your sexual maturity, you grow and you start to take interest in the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever, and you begin to focus more on your sexual relationships and your romantic relationships, and you move away from this collaboration of what it means to have a band of brothers. And I think that is a really interesting psychology that happens with young boys growing into men. It's just that we begin to become more competitive with our peers, begin to distrust our peers, we begin to move into a new phase of what it means to be a man. And when society kind of forges this idea that you have to be in competition with other men, it makes it very difficult for you to have a full relationship with them. And I think that's kind of where I start with that conversation. Is just how do we rebuild those ideas of trust and platonic intimacy and just having conversations with one another to allow us just to become better, just better men and learn from other men. I'm always keen on new fathers or new husbands, just maintaining a source or level of their friendships so that they can then have a space to just develop themselves, to kind of, brainstorm, to knock ideas, to deconstruct, or to de-stress maybe, but also just take the pressure off their spouses and their significant others so that they've got other places that they can bring things to. Because I've seen what that looks like when men don't have friends and all the pressure is then kind of put into the family to become that emotional cushion.
Definitely relate to that. I think when I was younger, I had loads of friends. And then especially becoming a man in my late 20s, becoming a dad, I found I wasn't making an effort with my male friends anymore. I just wasn't necessarily prioritizing it. And there was one particular New Year's Eve, it may have been 8 years ago now, I said my New Year's resolution is to make more of an effort with my friends. There was a guy that I'd met at baby massage and we got on really, really well. And he lived down the road from me and I got his number. I'd done all the work, but I just wasn't being proactive. And I was like, why aren't I messaging him? He's cool. We're quite similar. So I said, you know what, I'm going to make an effort this year. And I did. And actually, he is still a good friend. And I think through my work, I've been able to quite easily have that network because of the work I do. It's quite natural. But what do you think is the kind of consequences of not having friends? What does that look like for our well-being and also our kind of romantic relationships as well?
I mean, the consequences are that I feel like personally you become the worst version of yourself. I think that when you deprioritize your friendships, you don't have an objective kind of support system outside of you. Do you see what I mean? I think that you can't step out and be like, oh, you're having issues within your marriage, or you're having issues raising your child, or you're having issues at work, just things that as humans, we need to speak to one another about stuff and share stories so that we don't feel that we're taking on this burden alone. So I came back from teaching abroad in 2015, and I had no supports. I had no networks in London. I'd left London to go to university, and then all my friends were from different parts of the country. So when I came back to London, I didn't have any body really. And then I kind of steamrolled into this new career as a journalist, right? And I didn't have anybody there. And I was going through extreme pressures at work and I didn't have anybody to share that with. But because I didn't have anybody outside of my family to really speak to about what was going on, found myself going down a depression, found myself in the alcohol cabinet each night. I was pouring that brandy, guys. It was not cute at all. And it wasn't until I developed some strong friendships that they really pushed me into going into therapy, pushed me into having more of these conversations, sharing these challenges, these work challenges with other people. And I began to be able to manage that stress because the stress was really having an impact on my body. It was bringing up issues of potential autoimmune problems. And it's just not something that a 25-year-old man should really have to be experiencing. And then that's when I sat down and thought to myself, this can't be it. I have to put a lot more effort into my friendships so that I can have places to go that are soft landing places when things just become really hard in the real world.
I was actually thinking quite a bit about loneliness because there's definitely been points in 2024 where I felt lonely because I've had some challenging experiences. And I think people sometimes, when you say you're lonely, equate it with being alone. And it's not always the same thing. And, I don't feel alone at all, but I have felt lonely. And I guess that's because I haven't felt, with everything that's been going on in my head, I haven't felt like I'm connecting to the people that are around me in any sort of meaningful or real way. Do you think, as well as men being alone, and not having as many male friendships, they also can have male friendships and still feel very lonely?
I mean, loneliness is literally when the quantity of the relationships around you don't match up to the quality. And you can be in a room full of people that say they love you and care about you, and you can still feel extremely lonely because you don't have that emotional connection or that real feeling of being seen and being valued and feeling like you belong in a space. But loneliness is a real thing, and vulnerability does come with a risk. It comes with the risk of being hurt, and you don't tend to venture down that road because it's like, oh, I don't want to be too vulnerable because I don't want someone to hurt me. But that's what the risk is. You put something really precious to you on a table, hoping that the people you present it to treat it kindly and nicely. And then, somebody might push it off the table by mistake or on purpose. And so you kind of just have to deal with, are you okay with that being pushed off the table and smashing? I think we just need to be taking a lot more risks with those things. Calculated risks sometimes. Don't just be out here just giving everything away.
Alex, you mentioned I don't know if burden is the right word, but the additional responsibility, I guess, on our partners. If we don't have another outlet, someone else to kind of share stuff with, there's more work, emotional work for our partners. I saw some research around how loneliness can impact health. So in people who are more lonely, there's more damaging proteins that are found, which can lead to stress and leads to cardiovascular diseases. So there is a very real link here between health and well-being and longevity and the amount of quality relationships that we have. So how can we encourage, for the parents listening and the friends listening, how can we encourage our sons and the young boys around us to forge and continue to maintain kind of healthy, platonic, intimate friendships?
Oh, this is a big question. I don't know.
This is why you're here, Alex.
No, dude.
Just solve friendship
Just
for all of us,
just
please.
solve the equation.
In a few sentences.
I think that I think it does start with with that reconfiguration of the idea of what boyhood is. I think that to just something that they are interested in, and then doing that in community. So that is train building, bird watching, train spotting, etc. Whatever that looks like, getting them out there and being able to speak and communicate with people who have similar interests to them. I'm thinking just get your boys into spaces where they can be in community with other people from as early as possible, so they know what it's like to share the emotional burden with other people. Instill those lessons of generosity and empathy and how to relate to another person, rather than championing the values of competition and winning. Just kind of like build that character.
Do you think there is a difference between the way girls build friendships and the way boys build friendships? I have two sons, and when one of them recently had a sleepover and the boys came over, and they didn't respond in the same way that when I had girlfriends over for sleepovers, we'd all sort of jump into bed together and have a gossip and a giggle and be like all over each other, really affectionate, really touchy-feely. And what I've witnessed from my boys is that they don't really touch each other, and their conversation, they don't sort of look at each other, I feel, as much as girls do when they're having conversations. There's a bit more, they sort of want to be their focus, it feels like they want their focus to be on something else so that they're able to have conversations. I just wonder if there's anything you've noticed in your research about the way boys build friendships, and if there's anything in that causes these problems later down the line.
There are several theories. I think one of the big ones is that guys have side-to-side relationships, shoulder-to-shoulder, and girls tend to have face-to-face relationships. So they really do have that emotional awareness of like looking at one another. I don't know if you've seen Inside Out 2. Have you seen it?
Bit of it.
So there's a scene in Inside Out 2 when they obviously there's the core emotions at the dashboard, but there's a bit where Riley, the main character, talks about next year going to school, and then there's like a twitch in one of the girls' eyes, and then the disgust emotion is like, hold on, what's going on there? And then they zoom in to that, and they do like a forensic analysis as to what that twitch could mean, and then it goes into the other girl's eyes, and then their disgust emotions like, oh my gosh, she's found out the twitch. And I think it's good, and because they're looking at each other for those cues, those social cues, to figure out where people are at emotionally. Whereas boys, the relationship building is built through a collaborative experience. So doing stuff together, so going on games together. I've been in groups of guys where we're just sitting there looking at the screen playing games, and I think that both things are valid. So there is a point where boys kind of reach that emotional maturity where they begin to look at one another and actually start to have those conversations one-to-one as they mature. But if we don't reach that emotional maturity, I think that as we grow into men, we end up continuing that kind of same pattern of what is comfortable. You know, you just sit side by side watching a football match, you sit side by side in the pub, you sit side, you know what I mean? You don't really look at one another, you don't really see one another. And that's because that is another layer of vulnerability. And then, in order to see somebody, you have to then pry further into that whole how are you really kind of conversation. I think girls like go further in to find out what's going on, whereas boys don't really do that.
Alex, you're the second guest that's mentioned Inside Out 2.
Love it.
It's a great film, and I think it really kind of looks at emotions, and there's interesting things going on there around gender as well. I want to turn into mental health. The rate of probable mental health disorders in young people aged 17 to 19 is 1 in 4, 25.7%. Suicide is the leading cause of death for men under the age of 45. Approximately 12.5% of men in England are experiencing a common mental health problem disorder right now. But men are less likely to access psychological therapies. Only 36% of referrals to NHS Talking Therapies are for men. So why is this? Your book was largely around mental health. A lot of your work is around mental health. Can you talk to us about, for young boys and men, like why are those mental health outcomes so poor in the UK?
If you're conditioned as a very particular sector of society to not speak about the things that are happening and not be able to sit face to face with another person and speak to them, sitting down in front of a therapist, looking them in the face one-to-one is not going to be very useful. It's not going to be very comfortable to them either. So there's that. A lot of men have confided in me in that they just don't have the courage to sit in front of a therapist. It's about actually kind of sending the email, getting the response, going to the therapy room, sitting down and then talking. And a lot of men just don't have the language, just don't have the words a lot of the time to be able to do that. Not to say that everyone does, just, quite a few kind of have that experience of being silenced growing up, witnessing their fathers being very stoic and not saying much at all. I remember growing up and I was literally told both directly and indirectly that men don't speak. So it's ironic that I'm here with Time to Talk. I've been looking at male-friendly approaches to therapy for the past 18 months to 2 years and figuring out that one of the best ways to get men into a therapeutic setting is through group work, through group therapy, through men's groups. And it's like what I talked about earlier about collaborative experiences. Men like that idea of being able to contribute. And when they're in a group of men that they trust in a close circle, they begin to develop relationships with these men because they're actually learning, listening, feeding back, understanding, contributing, and receiving support in a way that they probably not ever been used to. And then this is a good gateway to then go to individual therapy because they already understand and appreciate the process. And so when we're talking about why don't men go to therapy, it's because we're just not communicating the same thing in the way that men need to be communicated with. It's very, very beneficial for women. Women are used to already speaking about what's going on with them and used to being in those really emotional spaces. Men just are have not been socially conditioned that way. Get men into group work.
Yeah, we do a thing called the Lodge. Free Music Football Fatherhood. It's online group therapy for dads, and I completely understand what you're saying there. The experience of getting men together and sharing for the very first time and being part of that process. You can just see it on people's faces. It's daunting sometimes, but really special. Like I get goosebumps thinking about it because it's an experience that for many of us we never had. Never had the license, the permission, the environment to come in and express yourself amongst people that are doing it as well. Some of the things that people share you would never imagine because you see them on a day-to-day basis. You see them online. They look happy. They're smiling. They're getting on with their lives and their jobs. And then when they are actually allowed to share and it's safe, the stories they share you would never believe because they have learned to kind of mask that and go through life just showing up, just protecting, just providing, just doing the thing. But underneath that, there's so much pain. Building on that, I think as a society, we've done so much work to try to encourage people to talk, men and women to talk, it's good to talk, etc. But I don't think we've done as much work on the listening side of things. And I remember I've got a good friend who taught me so much about listening. His name's Alex Grant, and he lost his wife during childbirth. He lost her during childbirth. I just started MFF at the time, and I did an independent article and that kind of went out there, and I didn't know Alec at the time. and he phoned me and he told me his story. And I remember just not knowing what to say to him. And I kind of just froze, and I felt like I was doing a shit job at listening and holding that conversation. And in getting to know Alec over time, learning so much from him about how to have like really difficult conversations and how to be a good friend and how to listen and how to not make it about you, how not to internalize things, how to just hold space. And I've learned so much from Alec. What do you think we need to do on the flip side of talking in terms of listening? What does good listening look like? How do we hold space for men who do eventually share with us if we're lucky enough and privileged enough to be in that situation?
Good listening is listening to respond and not just to kind of react to what is being said, and being able to respond to what is being said and in a way that isn't you thinking about the response. So when you're listening and you're taking in the information, it's being able to metabolize that information, being able to ask active questions when listening to kind of help learn more about what is being said. Asking what they call good questions. So asking things like, and so what does that mean to you? And so and what was that like for you, to help the person that is sharing with you to explore more, to go further, and to feel like they're being held emotionally, whether that be over the phone or in person. Because what I found is that when people are talking, especially when men are talking to one another, there's always this, I want to respond, I'm listening, I'm hearing what they're saying, but I've got this point that I want to get across, and I don't want to lose this point I'm holding on. So I'm going to wait for a break in the speech so that I can then throw what I want to say in there and then just get that out of there, and then that should help fix the situation. So, no, that's just not how it works. So then now the person doesn't feel like that you were listening. So when I say listen to respond, I mean like you're listening to what is being said and then you respond to what has been said, not necessarily with what you want to say. You literally respond to what is being said. And I think those listening skills are honed through things like the group work, because then you just become a better listener. You become a better person who's present, and people then trust you more. And then you're able to then have more meaningful conversations going forward. And that then reduces what we talked about, the impact of loneliness, the feeling of not being heard, seen or valued. I do think that, like in schools, I think then, counseling skills probably should be like a sixth form sub-subject or something like that, just so that people are just learn how to be better communicators.
I think from my experience, lots of men try and fix your problem when you're telling them what's the matter. And often when people don't want that, they just want to vent, they just want to offload, and they want somebody to just, as you have brilliantly articulated, Alex, just to say stuff like, tell me more, I'm listening, like tell me a bit more about that, or tell me a bit more about this. And that's enough. That feels that you then have vented, you've got it off your chest, and you just feel lighter as a result. And I watch with my sons now, and they're terrible listeners. I mean, they're only 11 and 9, but when their friends come over and tell them things, you can see they've just totally switched off and they're just waiting to tell them something back. What would you say to parents of boys to help them become better listeners?
Routinely put them in headlocks and then just tell them, listen. Because I think what we don't tend to recognize is that boys' minds are developing at a different rate. And I think that if you consistently instill a very particular idea, they will inevitably develop that as they grow older. Repetition. Are you listening to what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? What have I said? What have you taken from what I said? I've sat there and boys will come into the room with their arms crossed. And I'm like, okay, so there's no way that I'm going to try and get through to this one. But then I just take out my Uno cards and start dealing a game, and they're like, actually, this could be fun. So we started to have this conversation. Just generally light conversation. Have you played Uno before? Is this something that you want to and then we start playing this game. And then they start to open up. They start to slowly kind of begin to feel safe.
I also, when I ask my boys how their day was and they tell me, and then I say, are you going to ask me how my day was? And are you going to listen to the response? I always think, hopefully that's instilling in them that It's not just all about you.
Yeah, but
like you've got to pay an interest in other people.
So it's not so much, are you going to ask me what my day? It's when somebody asks you how your day was, they then ask the person. Because my mum did that to me once, and I was like, I just like asking you what your day was like. But then I'm like, actually, I should actually inquire into other people's lives and see what that is. You know what I mean?
And that's a great way to end. Alex, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing speaking to you. It really, really has. And thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability. I think you kind of role modeled the behavior that we've been speaking about in this podcast. So we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys,
for coming on the podcast. Just so what's next for you in 2025? What's going on? How can people reach out to you? What are you going to be doing this year?
So I'm trying to establish just new ways of working with men. As we mentioned, I'm just working on men's groups, trying to get a lot more men involved in that process. There's so much changing on a day-to-day basis. I think that just even sitting with young people in general, just getting an idea as to kind of what their lives are like. I'm learning so much as to kind of what they're experiencing, and not so much has changed since we're in school. The challenges are still there. The challenges are still the same, and I think that I'm probably going to lean a lot more into helping and working with these young people in sixth form and colleges, just to kind of help prepare them for what happens next. Because that's sixth form is a time where it's a gap that is usually overlooked. They get out of the traditional school system, and they're now in college and sixth form, and they're kind of just not really prepared for what happens when they get to university or go into the world after that. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Yeah, and just working on how to kind of improve the messaging for mental health for men. So watch this space.
Watch this space. So thank you so much, Alex. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm a transformation director with 15 years experience helping businesses make major change. I bring a deep understanding of problem solving, trend analysis, and stakeholder engagement. I'm able to operate at both executive and team level. I'm personable and pragmatic with a huge passion for my work.
Pregnancy and maternity discrimination shreds the careers of 74,000 women every year. At Pregnant Then Screwed, we can stop it. Visit careershredder.com to show your support.